Hi guys, welcome back to the channel, Julie with Joey Star Astrology. How is everybody doing on this new moon in Leo, along with the retrograde Venus, halfway through its cycle in Leo, and coming up on a Mercury retrograde in Virgo that will start next week. A lot going on, and of course, this new moon is squaring the planet Uranus, the planet of change, what's unexpected, sudden shifts, things out of the blue. So it's been quite an exciting time. And with the Venus retrograde leading up to this new moon, and having had contact with Uranus twice so far, and will again for a third time after its retrograde, it's been quite an exciting time in terms of twists and turns. And I've heard a lot of stories that definitely show that the astrology gives us some clues as to the kind of energy that's in the environment at any given time. So very interesting time. And I'm going to take you through the chart, but it's important to understand that when we have, when we're looking at transits and how things might affect people, you and me, we should know that and keep in mind that most significantly affected are signs that are in the in and being hit by where the planets are transiting. So in this case, with the new moon in Leo and the Venus retrograde, it's going to affect most significantly the sign of Leo and any placements in Leo. Scorpio, which is a square to the sign of Leo. It's another fixed sign. We're talking about all fixed signs here. Aquarius, the fixed air sign, and Taurus, right? And so Taurus and Leo are the big players here, but those placements can be significantly affected by transits like this, depending on the placements in your chart. And of course, if you're a Leo rising or a Taurus rising, sun as well, very significant. And, you know, the rising is on the angles. So angular placements with any of these signs are also likely to be affected more significantly than maybe other people. And, you know, if you're not somebody that has those type of placements, this transit could be uneventful for you. But, you know, we all obviously come in contact with people and have relationships. And so we might see these things playing out in the lives of people that we're close to, or just out there in the world. And there are so many themes that can be brought up that explain the archetypes of the signs and the planets. And so it's really, you know, the possibilities here are endless. And the magic really happens when you take a look at any person's individual chart and break it down. And it can be amazing to actually see the relation to the planetary transits versus the planets in somebody's birth chart. So I'm going to take you through and look at the actual chart of the new moon and explain the generalities and the themes around that. But I'm also going to do something a little different because, and I know I've talked about this on my channel before, that I like to, I'm really in the place in my study of astrology to try and match what's going on in a chart to events that are going on out in the world. It's fascinating to me, and I find myself studying it. And to be honest, you know, I think that obviously all astrologers or enthusiasts are doing, you know, some version of that anyway, whether it be, you know, within the people that they know in their own lives or their own situations or just out there in the world. But it's fascinating. And so I thought that it would be really interesting and fun to show you in specific terms in a situation that I noticed is going on out there in the world, quite public, that when we look at the astrology, it's uncanny how it matches the planetary energies. So I'm going to do that after I take you through the new moon chart, and hopefully you'll find that interesting. I have a lot of people ask me, well, how's this going to play out for me? Just in generalities. And of course, all you can do is give general general themes, what types of things could happen, but it isn't until you actually look at how the transiting planets are affecting something in particular that you can actually see it. So I'm going to give you some of those generalities. We're going to take a look at the chart here for the new moon and point out. Whoops, I got a little stick in my share here. Hang on, let me try that again. There we go. I don't know why that button stuck, but I had a stuck button. Okay, let's throw in the old glasses. Take a look at this. So now you can see that we have the new moon over here. Oops, my drawing tool. I'm doing something new if you guys haven't noticed. So have some patience here if you don't mind with my little drawing tool. So we have the new moon here in the sign of Leo, 23 degrees and 17 minutes. And this occurred early this morning. Here I am, 2:37 a.m. Which is, I'm on Pacific Coast time, even though I'm not on the coast. And this would have been occurring at about 5:37 on the East Coast. So if you're outside of the United States, give a look at the at the time where you were, and adjust for where you are in the world. But we have this new moon in Leo. And we also have, that's coming into play significantly and has been, is this retrograde. And that's what the RX means, the Venus retrograde here in Leo. And you can see that there is a lot of activity in Leo. We have Lilith here too, also in the sign of Leo, that's conjunct this moon. So this is a very, very active new moon in the sign of Leo. And we had a conjunction over the weekend as we were in the balsamic moon phase coming into this new moon, where things can get a bit intense in the balsamic phase. And over the weekend, the moon was in the sign of Cancer, which is very emotional, and it was actually opposing Pluto. So what's going on for any person that's being affected by this Leo stellium and this new moon and the retrograde that's been occurring since July, probably has been in the works for a while, right? Venus made its first square to Taurus back in the beginning of July, and then later Venus went retrograde in July. I think it was July 22nd. So when we have a retrograde planet that's actually hitting another planet during a retrograde, it's going to pass over it 3 times. And I may have gone over that before, but this new moon signifies the second square. Square creates tension. So usually it's of the nature of Mars. So it's tripping off some kind of action or creating some kind of tension for us that makes us feel like we need to do something. It can be very, very intense. And that second square is happening today, but up to the point of this new moon, as I was saying, over the weekend, as we were coming through the balsamic phase of this moon, it could have felt sort of like a crescendo, like whatever's been going on is sort of building in intensity in some way. And then could have seen a break, an emotional break for sure. Something coming to sort of a boiling point over the weekend, and then a change actually occurring sometime in the last 24 hours, and even coming, this is obviously still in effect. And since it's a very powerful new moon, they're calling it a supermoon, which means that it's closer to the Earth here and definitely traveling with Venus. So it's very significant and powerful. So we're making now, coming into this new moon, which we had today, Venus, the new moon is squaring exactly, and you can see exactly 23 degrees. So this is a breaking point. When we're talking about the sign of Leo, which is all about our expressions and our children and how we love passionately, taking risks. Leo, of being a fixed fire sign, is very bold and loud. The sun rules the sign of Leo. So this is not an energy that sort of sits back like, behind the curtain, or, behaves like a wallflower, not generally anyway. So this can be very, very loud. And we have Taurus, Uranus, which we know wants to shake things up, change, move things forward, progression, all Uranus in the sign of Taurus, a fixed earth sign. And neither of these signs, Taurus or Leo, because they're both fixed, want to move. So things don't move very easily. So the breaks and the changes take a while. And when the pressure gets to be so intense, things can burst, right? And they can happen unexpectedly. It can be positive. These things can be positive. Again, when I was saying, it's like the themes around these things are similar, are the same, the archetypes are the same, but how these play out in people's lives can be different. So these can be very positive transits when we are talking about the retrograde here that we've been going through with Venus representing relationships and how we love and money. And we could be experiencing the square in the retrograde to in the form of having things that we have been working on from the past, or something coming back from the past that we lost, even finding something when it comes to our finances, or something having to do with the relationship. And children really, really come into play here in this transit as well. So it doesn't have to be negative, but at the same time, depending, again, there's a lot of like depending in astrology. This could be a time where, because Venus is retrograde, we're not feeling seen and heard. We're feeling restless. We could be feeling sad because, Leo is all about our expression and our happiness, what brings us pleasure. And having a Venus retrograde, we may feel a little flattened based on circumstances that are going on in our lives. We may be reflecting on times past in regarding relationships or finances or whatever situation, and finding that we're feeling very restless and we need to break away from something. Maybe we want to get back to something. So this is kind of where what everybody's hearing is, exes can come back, relationships can break up, you can have problems with, money, like losses of money, things that are coming, something that you thought was over and done with comes back up and it affects your finances, or there's just, Uranus is really unpredictable. So it can be a lot of change in those areas for us that we may not have been ready for. But again, they could be positive changes that come out of nowhere that actually push us forward into the future, where we see huge progress in those areas. And, Venus was squaring Jupiter as well, which does make whatever's going on, has the potential to make whatever's going on bigger, right? So we could have a bigger problem or we could have a bigger gain, right? Or profit if we're talking about finances. So those are some of the themes that we have been dealing with potentially with Venus retrograde, and then now the new moon conjunct Venus pretty much within 5 degrees, and squaring Uranus again for the second time in the sign of Taurus. So those are the basic themes. And when we look at Uranus, is just a really big player, period, in the astrology right now, today, and within this new moon, again, because of the square to the new moon, but also because we have almost an exact trine, which is of the nature of Jupiter. So something big, something opening up, some kind of potential opportunity. And the same applies where, Uranus, it could be something sudden. And when we're talking about Mars, which is action, it can be aggression, but it can also be in the sign of Virgo, a plan of action, right? Or some kind of movement. And Mars is working with Mercury in the sign of Virgo, which is a good place for Mercury to be. Mercury rules the sign of Virgo, so this is good. But there's some kind of communication or opportunity potential, or potentially with this trine here that very much plays into the new moon. Why? Because Uranus is at play, and so these don't work. These aspects don't operate generally independently. So there's a flow. So something here in Virgo can actually be helping or opening up further whatever situation has been going on with this retrograde Venus and along with this new moon. And when we think about what that might be, if there have been problems, we're having trouble with money or trouble in a relationship or trouble with our children, maybe we come to a place where Mars in Virgo has a plan of action, wants to have a conversation, wants to fix something, make an amends, or cut something out completely. This can happen suddenly, right? A sudden aha moment. Oh, I know what to do. Or that can add to the break. We have this conversation, we've gotten down to the details, Virgo, and this is how we're going to move forward, Uranus. Things like that can happen. And these types of themes can very much play into the breaks and the challenges and changes potentially with the squares from Leo, the new moon, Venus, and the planet Uranus in the sign of Taurus. Now, we also have, additionally, happening here, is we have the Virgo energy also opposing Neptune in the sign of Pisces. And listen, Mars opposite Neptune in these signs, Virgo and Pisces, could be chasing a dream, right? Actually finding the energy and the plan to actually go for it and create the dream, Neptune, that you always wanted. This is great for creativity. If you are going back to, for instance, some kind of creative project or something that you did in terms of art or anything that brings you pleasure, Mars here could really charge you up and giving you a plan and allowing you to take physical action to actually follow that dream. At the same time, if there are issues and problems, Mars opposite Neptune could conjunct, working with Mercury in Virgo, can actually cloud the situation, cloud our emotions, create confusion, or completely eliminate the plans that we've had, right? Because Neptune does that. Neptune can dissolve, but it can also lift us higher, right? And provide inspiration in some way. So how these things play out are, again, it depends on what's going on in any chart at any given moment. Virgo also represents things, our body, our physical body, how we take care of it. And that opposition to Neptune, we could feel very tired. We could feel, or we could, in our heads, we want to move, we want to go, but we don't feel like we have the energy. It can be that. It can also be frustration in the terms of, I am done with all of this, and it's causing depression and confusion and a complete mess. There could be deceit involved in whatever's going on. And, it could be a complete, again, like a breakaway, or this could actually, because this is physical, represent some kind of true physical ailment, or the frustration could be so intense that you end up harming yourself in some way, right? So this is a transit along with, if you're feeling intense already with the squares to Uranus, a transit that you really would want to be careful not to do anything rash with your body, but rather, take care of it, be a little kind and calm to yourself if you're feeling, overly stimulated. So these things can come, show up in a lot of different ways. But that's what we're dealing with. And we're coming into a Mercury retrograde that is already in shadow because Mercury's retrograde, and I covered this in another video, will be within this span where it's at now. So the retrograde actually begins officially on the 23rd, but we're in the shadow period. So when we think about Mercury in Virgo, this is also taking a look back. It's conversations, it's documents, it's work, it's our bodies, it's in service. So, you know, this too could also be a job loss, right? Or a change of some sort, or some kind of pressure. But Mercury is going retrograde along with this Venus retrograde. And this could mean that the themes that we've been dealing with as a result of the Venus retrograde, and that maybe are coming to a head, and we're getting some kind of clarity, or getting to some kind of emotional crescent, peak, right? At this point, like I explained, when the conjunction between Venus and the Sun happened over the weekend, we could be at a place where there just is a break, right? And it could be a physical, it could be affecting us physically. Virgo is very much about, and that could include your, a job situation or a relationship situation, or somebody that we're responsible for caring for, right? So the retrograde can be bringing those things back, because that's a return. But it could also be, along with the Venus retrograde, just an indication that whatever is going on and we're trying to work through in Virgo, that this could continue to be a theme, and information could continue to come in, and that with both the retrogrades and all the other planets in retrogrades, we may be able to, we might expect that there's some back and forth, and these situations may not resolve themselves until Venus is coming out of retrograde, and then Mercury comes out of its retrograde. So there's a potential here for things to get really interesting. And with a Mercury opposing Neptune and Mars opposing Neptune, again, the information may not all be there, things aren't clear, and we probably shouldn't believe necessarily everything that we hear from whoever's giving us the information, or whatever our sources are. But take advantage of the fact that Mercury is in Virgo, and we can do research, right? We can get down to the details, and we can figure things out on our own. But it's just a bit of a tricky balance. So that's the new moon. I hope everybody is doing well with these transits. This has been, for a lot of people I've talked to, and for myself personally, I have a moon in Leo at 17 degrees. So that's the moon is your environment and your emotions. And so I've really, really felt that personally on an emotional level, the retrograde and all of the energy in Leo, and the squares to Taurus. So I can tell you, depending on where it hits you, it can be pretty significant. All right, so I'm going to stop the share on this. If you guys have any stories to tell about your experience so far with all of the Leo energy and the retrograde and the squares to Uranus, when it comes to your finances or relationships or your creative expression, or your children, anything like that, let me know. I'd love to hear about it. I've heard, talking to my friends and things going on, I've heard in a lot of interesting examples, things going on in their lives that represent this, from having, I have a friend who, has, a primary profession in healthcare, but is an artist at heart. And he, I think it seemed that he was flattening a little bit in terms of, his desire for art, and how could he balance that with his, his profession, his medical career. And really missing it, and maybe kind of feeling a little bit lost in these last months. And I follow him on his social medias and keep in contact with him. And I noticed in the last few weeks, that he has picked, a few days actually, he has picked his art back up, made a grand statement, that he wants an art studio. And so he picked up that creative expression from the past. I mean, probably realized somehow in these last few months that he was missing it. There was something missing, right? Joy, pleasure. It was potentially his creative expression. And so he's picked that back up. And, Mars and Mercury and Virgo, he's created a plan to follow a dream, a creative dream, which is very much Neptune with that opposition. So there's an example. I also had another friend who got a hold of me day before yesterday. Very dear friend. He also happens to be my hairdresser, does my hair. He is a Libra rising, and so we have a Venus retrograde, and it's going to affect most significantly, like I said, Taurus, Leo, the fixed signs, but also those whose charts are ruled by Venus, which would be Libra and Taurus. And so he got a hold of me. He's a hairdresser. He's fantastic. And he had recently acquired a new client that was referred to him by a friend. And he gets new clients all the time. But obviously for him to mention this client, it was, a big deal. And he picked this client up back in June, and, very picky, very eccentric. And I think he kind of knew that. And she had a long history of bleaching her hair and putting in extensions. And so there was a lot of damage, and he's very conservative. He's very conservative. He's good at what he does. Probably about 8-9 years ago, I wanted to go blonde, and I did. Boy, was that a change, because I had dark hair. And he cautioned me, and he's like, well, this is going to take a 3-month process. He's very interested in not damaging hair, all of those things. Like, he'll tell you like it is. So he had picked up this new client, and her hair was kind of a mess. And so, of course, being the conservative person he is, he recommended conservative, like no more bleach, take out the extensions. This isn't, you've got to let your hair recover. And over the course of the last few months, since Venus went into Leo, and we've experienced the retrograde and the squares to Uranus and Jupiter, she's been back 3, 4, 5 times now, and agreed to do things one way, then came back, I don't want to do that, but slowly inching her way into getting back to where she was, which he had cautioned her, against. And he's spending all this time trying to make this person happy, and she's arguing with him, and she's disruptive, and she's entitled. And, after a few months, he's like, oh my gosh, what have I gotten myself into? And it came to a head, right, yesterday. And then there's like blows thrown, and I'm not happy, and you did this and you did that, and I want my money back, and wah. I don't know what her chart is. I know his chart. But I'll bet she has Leo placements. And maybe the expression from her of Leo is, I'm entitled to, right? This is what I want. But, with the Venus retrograde in Leo, it's very much about aesthetics too. Venus, it's like, it's always recommended during Venus retrograde, don't change anything about your look. Don't get plastic surgery. Don't buy, new big expensive things, because Venus is money in a retrograde, because you can find out that it's not really what you wanted, or it's, wasn't worth the money, and, all of those kinds of things. So these weird kind of things can happen. And so he's dealing with that situation. So that was another example. And I thought that was like, interesting. And reflective, right? It's related. It reflects his placements, being a Libra rising. And of course, he has other placements that when I look at the chart, I'm like, oh yeah, well, there's that right there. But I want to show you a public example, aside from all the things that we see out there, which is, the fires, we know Leo makes things hot, and the sun is shining very bright with all of that Leo. We've seen fires that have affected the land and our resources, which is Taurus, Uranus bursting. So we've seen, accidents and fires like the one in Hawaii, and now Virgo, it coming in with the trine. It's like there are cleanup efforts. There are groups coming in to provide service to help clean those things up. That trine represents that. So we know about those kinds of things, and, the extreme weather and all of that. But this situation that came up that I wanted to use as an example is quite interesting when you look at the astrology. So let me go in here. I'm going to be fuddling with this in the background here. You probably won't be able to see it, but that's okay. What this is I'm sure a lot of you, I happen to be a sports fan, very much a sports fan. And so I noticed this story right away and found it very, very intriguing and interesting. And so when I followed it, I was like, oh, this really matches the retrograde in Leo, Venus in Leo, and some of the things that, like things that could be going on. And of course, Leo represents people that are on stage. So high profile. Leo is the sign of fame, right? So I'm going to walk you through this and what I'm talking about. And I want to say that, this is, this is hypothetical. Obviously, we don't ever know the true story behind things. And, hopefully this example will actually show you that that is the case, that, there are always potentially different sides to every story. But when we look at, from an astrological standpoint, when I look at things to try and match up the astrology, I just sometimes find it to be crazy. So I'm going to go through this example with you. And what I'm talking, again, hypothetical, right? This is a movie, not a documentary. But I just want to use it as an example to show you how the astrology can play out and how we can look at it. So I'm going to share again another chart and tell you what I'm talking about. Okay, so here we have the chart of Michael Orr. Again, I said I'm a sports fan, so this story has really captivated me. Total disclaimer, again, we really don't know what's happening. We have that Mars, Mercury, and Virgo opposite Neptune, like I mentioned, currently in the planetary energies, that we really don't know what's going on. Something's clouded. We're not on the inside of this. And of course, I think all of us that are reasonable, and have followed, situations in our life, we know that there are many times three sides to every story. So we don't really actually know the details from the outside looking in. So I want to say that for sure. And I'm not taking one side or the other. And this is not an example that I'm using because I want to turn it into something political, because it surely is not. But it's a great example. Okay, so what we have here, I have to go back and change this. So let me stop the share and fix the chart, because I had it set for a certain wheel style that gave me an Aries rising, and I want to change it so that we can actually look at this person's birth chart exactly how it is supposed to be. Let's see. All right, I'll go back and reshare, and we'll try this again. Thanks for hanging in there with me. I got to tell you, like, this is probably the first day that I felt less stressed than I have in recent days. So happy for that. Okay, so here we have the chart of Michael Orr. And if you guys don't know the story of Michael Orr, he is the person, and he's in the news right now. So unless you're under a rock or you don't read any news, and if you don't, I don't blame you. But this is the person of focus in the story from the movie The Blindside, right? So he was the kid that came from poverty and unfortunate circumstances and was brought in and helped by a prominent family, and ended up doing really, really well, getting a good education and becoming an NFL player, right? Initially for the Baltimore Ravens. And he wasn't playing for the Ravens when he retired. I don't remember who he was playing for when he retired, but I love the story. And I think, even if we aren't sports fans, everybody's seen the movie The Blind Side, right? It's a fantastic story. So anyway, what is going on or in the news, or what we're reading, is that yesterday, Michael Orr made a statement by filing a lawsuit to end a conservatorship that is apparently in place between him and Sean and Leanne Toohey, the couple that took him in when he was young, right? When he was basically, I guess, homeless and just in an unstable environment. So he's filed a lawsuit saying that he wants to end a conservatorship that was put in place. Well, a conservatorship is basically somebody who's appointed to take care of all of your affairs beyond the age of 18, right? It's different. It's like if you're under 18 and you have a legal guardian, they're already in that position. But a conservatorship puts another party in control of many things in your life, right? But definitely financial things. And of course, we don't know what kind of items were detailed or how that conservatorship was written. But he claims that it wasn't fair and that he wants to end it, right? He wants to terminate that. So he filed the case. And of course, we're reading all of these things that, he's claiming that the whole story was a lie and they made money. We don't know the truth of all of that, right? We just don't. Maybe it's just as simple as he filed to end the conservatorship. And after all these years, I guess if it were that simple, why not? He's in his 30s and, I'm certainly capable at this point, I'm sure, of taking care of his own affairs. Nonetheless, we don't really know. That's the thing. So let's take a look at Michael Orr's chart, knowing where the planets are transiting right now. But first, at his chart, we see that he is an Aries rising, he's a Gemini sun, and he is a Capricorn moon, right? So in the second house, we'll start there. In the second house, which is a house that can represent the potential for earning money, his sun and his Mercury is in Gemini. And Gemini is all about games. It's very much about games on the court, right? Yes, it's cerebral, it's about data, information, but Gemini is very much about activity ruled by Mercury. So right there, we see in his chart that he was born with the potential to actually make a living doing, being an athlete, right? Being in some kind of sport. So that matches. Now, as an Aries rising ruled by Mars, right? And we know that Mars is how we take action. It's about our physical body, especially as being rising. Definitely Michael Orr was a fighter, for sure, probably from the time he was born in one way or another. He has his nodes there, right? He's got a north node in Aries and a south node in Libra. Keep in mind that the nodes are currently in Aries and Libra. But the ruler, his chart ruler, Mars, is up here in the 10th house in the sign of Capricorn. And Mars is very strong in Capricorn. It's at the top of his chart. So it indicates that he has the physical ability and potential to really build a very strong foundation and be very, very strong in public and in his career, 10th house, right, on the midheaven. And we see that happened for him as well. So it matches, right? We also see that he has a moon in Capricorn, conjunct the planet Neptune. This can represent a lot of different things. The moon is not in a good spot in Capricorn. It's actually in its exile because the moon belongs or isn't at home in the sign of Cancer, and there's an opposition there. So we know that the moon in Capricorn it's not in a good, comfortable place, right? And it's in the 9th house of education, the higher mind, which is understanding concepts. It's your beliefs, it's your ability to learn on a higher level. It's your experiences, and it's conjunct Neptune, which can be confusion, right? Now, it's ruled by Saturn, and Saturn does get better over time, right? So it indicates, if we're talking about from the vantage point of, gaining some information potentially about his mother, right? there's obviously was a lot of confusion around his mother, right, at the time of birth. It probably passed on some emotional confusion to him, right? Neptune represents, substances, potentially drugs, alcohol, emotional issues, conjunct the moon, mother. Um, could also indicate some kind of a learning issues. Overall, could be emotional confusion, right? Now, yeah, Neptune can also be, like I pointed out when we looked at the opposition in the new moon chart, can be deceit and lies, right? Not being truthful. The moon is our emotions and our environment and, our mother and women in general and all those good things. So we can look at it a couple of different ways, but this chart, and I got this chart offline, and when you're looking for sample astrology charts, especially on celebrities, astro.com is a really good place to look. And it does give a rating in terms of how accurate or verified the birth times is on any chart for like a celebrity. And Michael Orr's chart had a double A rod. It's called a Rodden rating. It had a double A Rodden rating, which indicates that it's pretty, there's a confidence that it's pretty accurate, right? So anyway, we see that the themes in his chart really match his story based on what we know. If we also look at his Venus, he has a Venus in Cancer, which is a very nice place for Venus to be in the sign of Cancer in the third house, which is the mind and communication, his immediate environment. We know that Cancer is very emotional. Venus is what we value and what we love. It can be a very quiet energy. At the same time, it can be a very walled up and protective kind of energy. Just kind of depends. Again, there's always the pendulum there that swings back and forth. But, I think we knew, from if you followed the movie and you followed sports and maybe even his career to some extent, he was a soft-spoken person, right? Third house, communication, Venus, and sign of Cancer. Soft-spoken, maybe a little bit demure until he could, grow into his expression, his Venusian expression. And that matches what we know about him. So there's that. I wanted to go over that chart, and I'm getting to how this relates to the new moon, but I really think for context, it's good to see how this all works together. So I'm going to pull up Leanne Toohey's chart, and then I'm going to show you their charts together, right? Okay. So here is Leanne Toohey's chart. Now, I should start by saying that when it comes to Leanne Toohey's chart, and again, I think if we follow the story, we've seen the movie, we know who she is. She's the, I guess what we could call his foster mother or stepmother or something like that. And of course, she's got a reputation. She's very well known for being an advocate for children and very involved in sports. This chart I pulled from astro.com does not indicate that it is a 100% certifiable birth time. So I took this, there were a couple different ones that showed different placements, but I took this one and I'll tell you why. When we, as astrologers, you can kind of see the relativity, especially if there's context within, somebody's life, like, stories and information, you can kind of see what the likelihood of some of the placements are, although you will never know for certain, right? Just never know. But this is what we have to work with. And, I think that it's highly probable, or at least it matches. So what we have for Leanne Toohey is a Scorpio rising, a Leo sun at the top of the chart. And that's why I think that this is probably pretty darn close, if not it, in terms of her birth time. It's a noon chart. Most astrologers do a noon chart if the birth time's unknown, but somehow I feel like her sun, because of how high profile she is, and her, her personality is really big, and she is very well known and famous. We could say famous. Her sun being at the top of the chart in the house of career and her reputation, I think this is probably very likely, right? It fits. So sun in Leo, Venus in Leo, right? And what do we have in Leo right now? Retrograde Venus in Leo, if the sun in Leo. And we have a moon down here in Aquarius. We have a Mars over here in Gemini, which will be very significant when I actually flip the charts over and show you the correlation to Michael Orr's chart. But we have a Scorpio rising, which is ruled by Mars. And of course, there's a relation right there. There's a reason to talk about it. And also ruled by Pluto, which is at the top of the chart here too. When somebody has Pluto at the top of their chart, can really be a very powerful person. They know how to command power and attention. They know how to get things done, right? In the 10th house, they're very persistent and stubborn. In the sign of Virgo, that is about service, but it's about change and purification and, you know, taking control, and it's about the details, and very smart, very powerful person. And so that fits to me in that she is very powerful. She can persuade people to get things done. So when we have the connection here from her rising, we'll first start there, and one of the rulers of her chart being Pluto in a sextile too. So we have Scorpio rising sextile, one of the rulers, Pluto in the sign of Virgo in the 10th house. This is somebody who commands a lot, definitely commands a lot of attention, and has the ability to be very transform almost anything, take control of situations, turn something into nothing. Very driven, very controlled, very strong Scorpio, right? Now, used for good, this is a person that could really contribute to society through their personality and their ability to actually make things happen, and do so much good for other people if it were used that way. This is also potentially the signature of, you know, if somebody were to misuse this power, could easily, you know, get their way, feel entitled to have it, and influence and profit from that. Scorpio, right? By taking advantage. I don't know which way it is. I don't know her personally. I'm just reading the astrology, but actually know somebody who's a Scorpio rising and a sextile to Pluto in the 10th house. Very powerful person, without a doubt. The fact that she has, I'll just kind of show you the fact that she has Neptune on her ascendant in her 12th house in the sign of Scorpio makes her very, very intuitive. So working in conjunction to her rising, Scorpio rising, very, very has the ability to sort of see the forest through the trees, but also it can get a little mucky. Neptune, we talked about that in the new moon chart. Neptune can be a little mucky. There can be deceit, there can be illusions, there can be misunderstandings. It's conjunct her rising sign. You know, again, it's another one of those placements that can be used in a couple of different ways. Nonetheless, that's a powerful, very powerful combination. Again, going back to the rising, and that the secondary ruler is Mars, and we have that over there in her 7th house in the sign of Gemini. And Gemini, again, as I pointed out in Michael Orr's chart, is about gains. 7th house is about relationships with other people, partnerships. This is the signature placement of somebody who would be an absolute shrewd negotiator, sports agent, for sure. This person is going to be able to negotiate contracts, have a way with words, very quick thinking, and will do that, take action very fast, move. We'll do that in a Gemini, obviously those are all Gemini things, a Gemini way, but through relationships, 7th house, right? So rising ruled by Mars in the 7th house really takes action through relationships. Partnerships can be business partners, can be romantic partners, anything significant. So this person knew how to she knows how to negotiate contracts, and she knows how to get a win, right? In the business world through her relationships or for others in relationships. So she's obviously very tenacious, right? Quick-witted and smart. So we look at that, we see that she has this moon in Aquarius, which is very progressive, right? Can be, very things, emotions, right? Environment, very quick mind in the third house. May have a tendency to get nervous anxiety, right? Very progressive, looking into the future. Moon again, environment and emotions. So, it's kind of like ruled by Uranus and Saturn. Could go either way, but definitely intellectual and quick. We have a Saturn here, and this is significant in Capricorn, right? Very strong Saturn and Capricorn. Saturn rules Capricorn. It's in the third house of the mind, communications, negotiation. This is a very smart, strong woman, right? Probably in her negotiation skills and how she learns. She could even be, she's very serious, could be a little bit ruthless depending on the situation. So Saturn in Capricorn is very strong. We go back up to the top of her chart where we see Uranus, which, just makes her a firecracker. Her sun makes her very high profile, able to gain attention and fame, and Venus as well, loved by many, right? That's her reputation. Very strong, very powerful. It all kind of fits. Okay. So that's the Reader's Digest version of both of their charts. And now I want to show you the charts together and talk a little bit about the transits that are occurring right now. So I need to go and combine these charts up here. So give me a minute. Trying to do it with a pointer, and I just realized it's probably just easier to go back to my mouse. All right. And then resume drawing once I get the chart up. Okay. So here is an overlay of both of their charts, right? Any of you that have ever had a synastry reading done by me, you know that this is what it looks like, right? We take somebody's chart, we throw it over the top. This is not going to be a full synastry reading, just enough to point out some of the relationship and then compare it to some of the transits and how that's relating to this new moon right now. Okay. Just want to make sure I got my drawing tool on. Okay, so we have interesting, and you can see that Leanne Tui's chart is on the outside, and Michael Orr's chart is on the inside. So look at some of this. We've got Leanne Tui's Mars in Gemini that we talked about, how she's, a motivator, a negotiator, as within relationships, right? The Gemini theme, exactly conjunct Michael Orr's sun, right? In the second house, and we talked about that, his ability to earn money through sports, games, Gemini. We have her Mars conjunct both the sun and his Mercury, which, by the way, his Mercury is combust with the sun. So because Mercury is the mind, he probably needed a little bit of help and direction for, just with the placement. I mean, obviously we know some of his life stories, so they're, he did need direction, right? He's kind of on his own, but she gave him, we can see that she helped him, motivate him to start playing football, right? In this case, and helped him probably get into school and fill out the paperwork and deal with recruiters and all of those things in his college career, as well as his professional career. So we have that correlation there. We also see that all of her Leo that we talked about that's in the top of her chart is sitting in his fifth house. What is the fifth house? His expression. It's what he does for fun and pleasure. It's about children, right? They came together when he was a child. It is about sports a lot in the fifth house. And all of her Leo energies charging up his fifth house, right? Helping him, sort of put that fire, right, in that area of his chart, Leo. So that's very strong. We also have, and very interesting, is her Saturn in Capricorn conjunct his moon and his Neptune conjunction in Capricorn. So she clearly was a teacher for him, helped him get things straight. Ninth house, education, strong, stable philosophies. Michael Orr definitely benefited from her direction and instruction and her help as a teacher, Saturn. But it is likely, if we're looking at both sides of this potential story and what's being told, it's likely at a young age, and I think he was 17 or 18 when this conservatorship was apparently put into place, that he didn't understand ninth house legal things, right? The higher mind. He may not have understood exactly what that meant. And when he says that, when I read that, it's like, well, who knows if that's the case? But if I look at the astrology, it's definitely possible. Now, did he become aware of it as he got older? Because Saturn matures, it gets better with maturity, how you use those energies and they express, in a chart, in a birth chart in your life. Yeah, you do, but a lot of it depends on where somebody comes from. And we know that he came from a lot of confusion, right? Emotional confusion. But there's a very strong at-home Saturn in Capricorn conjunct his moon and his Neptune. So, if that wasn't a destined, right, something to be playing out, I don't know what is, right? And, definitely when he was young, I would say she had the heavy hand, she gave direction, and she was the leader, I would say, which again, he needed some of that for sure. You have her Neptune and her rising, right? Her ascendant in his seventh house definitely indicates conjunct the South Node, conjunct his Pluto, a very strong pull to this relationship. This is, we look at Synastry, this is a very strong aspect in Synastry for a relationship. Yes, South Node could be, working through past life karma, but destined in some way to have a relationship. So the Synastry absolutely is compelling to the story, and we know they had a significant relationship. Now, what's interesting is Michael Orr's nodes are at 28 degrees of Libra and Aries. And when this story broke, right now, the transiting nodes are at 28 degrees of Aries and Libra, Aries North Node, Libra South Node. If that's not evolutionary destiny, that whatever is going on right now, in some way is not meant to come up, serving whatever, he's at in his evolutionary process. I don't know what is. That's amazing, because the transiting nodes are in Aries and Libra at exactly 28 degrees. Now, if we go to where this Venus retrograde is and where Uranus and Taurus and all of these squares are occurring, the Venus retrograde, this is happening in Leanne Tuvi's 10th house, which is her public image. And we've got a Venus retrograde that's going back and forth over her sun, her midheaven, her Uranus, and her Venus. Something from the past is being brought up. This is very public. This is affecting her reputation potentially. And we see Venus retrograde in Leo when things are playing out on the stage. This can definitely represent a fall from grace in some way that she may need to do some kind of, damage control or recover from. But it absolutely fits. And in Michael Orr's fifth house, from, something coming back from the past, being dealt with, that was related to his childhood, his expression, his creative expression, which for him is sports, right? Interesting, isn't it? Very, very interesting. And we know that on the outer side, we've got Uranus and Jupiter that is transiting in what would be Leanne Tui's 7th house, keeping in mind that Taurus is ruled by Venus. So anything that's going on with Venus is affecting the Taurus area and the Libra area, which is relationships and money, right? Resources. This is very much coming into play with the retrograde. This is bringing up issues from the past relating to money that was earned through a relationship between the two of them that is now in question, that is affecting her public reputation, but somehow connected to his evolutionary path. And the timing was exact. Now, what else is interesting is the last time that Venus was in retrograde, and when we talk about the past, this is going to be different for everybody. Venus was last retrograde in the sign of Leo in 2015. I think it was retrograde. I'm not sure. Don't quote me on that, but it was in Leo, either retrograde or direct, in 2015. And then before that, in 2006 or 2007. Anyway, I did a little bit of history, and what's interesting is he retired in the 2016 season, right after this. So this is telling me that he was already thinking, like, something came up. We may not have known it publicly, but this may have started back in 2015. In 2007, Michael Orr was 19 years old, right around when Venus was in Leo the prior, when all of the potential or alleged conservatorship papers were drawn up. He's alleging that the conservatorship allowed them to have control. He didn't make money off the movie. The Tuohys put a statement out today saying they didn't make very much money off this movie. We don't know the answer to that either. We do know the Blindside was very successful. It made a lot of money. What the internal agreements were, we don't know. I can tell you that Leanne Tuohy is very capable of negotiating deals on behalf, of herself and within, her business. So we know that. Anyway, my point here is that this was, to me, destined and fated to happen, and could be a culmination of events, historical events, over the time span that I just mentioned to you. Now, another interesting thing is they say that he realized or spoke to a lawyer that what the conservatorship actually meant back in February 2023, which would not have been too long ago, right? I mean, he's an adult. People are saying, like, how did he not know, right? Well, what's interesting, I'm going to erase some of these lines I love to draw. What's interesting about that is we go back to his moon, Neptune conjunction in Capricorn, and her conjunct Saturn. Well, back in January of this year, Mercury was in retrograde in Capricorn. And we had a Venus retrograde in Capricorn prior to that. I don't remember the dates, so don't hold your hat on that. But we had a Mercury retrograde that affected Capricorn. Interesting. Mercury, something coming up from the past, information, conversations, right? In, the 9th house, something legal, right? Or becoming aware of something, right? 9th house is awareness. That could be true, right? People, it's funny because I've read a lot of the comments and on this case, and well, he was grateful then and he's not grateful now. Why is he waiting so long? Portraying him kind of as, the bad guy. Who knows? Maybe it is manipulative. Moon conjunct Neptune. Maybe he did learn to manipulate. Maybe not. Maybe it took him a while to actually come into what was really going on back when he signed that. And, he's maturing into that. Saturn, right? Things are coming clear. He's educated himself aside from that. The other thing, so it could be true. Like we don't know. It's possible, but there, just like with every other thing that we hear in the media, people are being really, really nasty about it. And we just, again, we just don't know. This, for me, is an astrological example that I find fascinating. So I wanted to bring it up. But this is going to be interesting to watch as it plays out with Mercury going into retrograde with this thing popping yesterday, the square to Venus, the new moon in Leo, this is a process that has probably been going on for a while. And, they're talking about this being an example of exploiting a child. Now, if that's true and all of this is true, it kind of would be, and it would be from the past, right? Who knows? I don't know. It's a long-standing story that's played out over time, but the astrology is amazing. And there's something here about the timing with the nodes of this coming back up, being brought back in, a relationship coming back in. Venus retrograde regarding resources, regarding a relationship. It is unbelievable. And of course, we know that Pluto is in Capricorn, right? Up here would be, if we're not looking at a transit chart, but it would be, up here in his 10th house, just past his Mars. And we know Pluto is squaring the nodes. So at least for Michael Oher and his evolutionary, process, this is definitely a step that had to be covered. And having a North node in Aries in the first house, and South node in Libra in the 7th house, part of his path is to learn how to balance relationships, right? Fairly, sometimes legally, Libra, 7th house, fighting for himself, having the confidence to stand up and say things, but also not going overboard, right? Not being ruthless. So again, we don't know the inside story. I think that we will hear more, right, as this unfolds. Maybe we'll know more by the end of September when Venus comes out of its retrograde. Maybe there'll be a lot more news that's coming out with Mercury in retrograde. Again, we don't know if it's true. We got oppositions to Neptune, but definitely something interesting to follow. And this was a really good example that I wanted to show you guys, Now, there's another thing, and it is a bit on a personal level, that I want to address here when looking at this chart and trying to put ourselves in the shoes of Michael Oher, right? And why, maybe, this is my own personal observation and feeling, maybe why it took him so long to say anything, right? Because he's really being criticized for that. And again, it could just be simply he decided to end the conservatorship and hadn't before. And maybe there's no problem or controversy between him and the Tuohys. And this is all just speculation and the media overblowing things. But why did it take him so long? Well, maybe he didn't understand, right? Maybe he just came into the awareness of that. But I will tell you this, and I'm going to stop the share because I'm going to just end with this thought here. I'm an adopted kid, right? And he's got moon in Capricorn. I don't have moon in Capricorn, but he's got the moon in Capricorn conjunct Neptune. What I do know is Saturn also can represent guilt and delays and, blocks and separations, and the moon is your emotions, right? And as an adopted kid, I can tell you that finding your place in the world sometimes, because you're alone, and this is not anybody's fault. It just is. And it is something that we do need to learn how to become aware of and find our place and step into who we are. But at a core level, when you're an adopted kid, it's quite common that you don't know where your place is. And you try very, very hard throughout your life to find a place. And you will overcompensate sometimes to do that, right? And it can take a while, and you can still even find yourself slipping, right? Doing things that you shouldn't do, or feeling guilty, or feeling obligated to anybody that accepts you, treats you well, being afraid to ask for more. There is an element of that with that separation, that whole psychology of being an adopted kid. And, it could simply be that he didn't feel like he had the right to step in and say, let's make this fair. I want to end this earlier, or feel okay and not feel guilty and obligated. And probably because, and that could have been something he brought on himself. Like I'm telling you, this can be internal, that it took him that long to feel like he deserved to even do anything like that. So he could have been aware of the whole situation and felt, I really owe this and my life to these people. And that's honorable and humble. But do you owe somebody that for the rest of your life? I don't know. That's a question, that you have to think about. But I can tell you that that feeling of obligation and fear, which is all, with his moon in Capricorn, fear, Saturn, having clarity, right, about what he knew and understood, and what he had a right to and where he belonged, and all of that could have taken a really long time for him to come into. And with the North Node in Aries, it's time for him to speak up and balance out whatever is going on there in the relationship, right? I hope it ends well. I really do. I wanted to show you this. It was an opportunity to show you how the retrograde and the new moon and all of the squares could affect a particular person or persons and a relationship. This is an amazing example. I really wish both of them the best. I'm a sports lover. Michael Orr is one of my favorite players, and I loved following Leanne Tui, and the Blindside movie is awesome. I've had my grandson watch it. I've seen it multiple times. I really hope that it plays out favorable for both of them, and that they can, balance the relationship out and come to an agreement and, repair their relationship if it's broken, right, in some way. But very interesting to watch this play out. And I think we might see this play out through the end of September to the beginning of October, and I'll be following it. But as far as the new moon, I wanted to use this as an example. I've been asked so much, how is this going to play out? How is this going to play out? And like I said in the beginning of the video, a lot of it depends on the chart that we're looking at that's being affected. And this was an awesome example, as well as my two other little stories. I could go into my own personal story here, but I'm not going to. Anyway, thank you guys for coming. I really appreciate it. If you like this type of video where I show an example, let me know in the comments, like, subscribe, share, all of that good stuff. Really continuing to work hard to be consistent and get back on track. It's a bit of a struggle for me. I've got things going on in my life, but I so appreciate your patience and your support, and all of you that reach out to me aside from the videos that I've read for. It's like, it might be a small, tiny group here for me, but they are super, super special and nice, and they add something to my life. So I really appreciate the support. But anyway, happy new moon to you. We have the Mercury retrograde next week. We have a full moon. We actually have 3 moons in the month of August, right? So we've got 2 more lunar events coming up, which I'll pop on and cover, and see if I can rustle up some more good ideas and follow stories. There was another thing, that happened last month, I think it was, where something came out about having a search warrant served on a home in regards to the Tupac Shakur murder, which they've never solved, from the late 90s. And I dove into that and I talked it over with my son, and that was really interesting. And I have some theories there. So I don't know if you guys like this kind of stuff. It's fascinating to me to look at it and to really dive in and look at both sides. Consider this, consider that. I've got so much Gemini. It's like information is critical, and finding like exactly how the dots connect and being able to consider both sides and put something together, that kind of stuff, I absolutely love. So let me know if you like that kind of stuff. We'll see if we can do more. Anyway, happy new moon. I will see you soon. Like, subscribe, and share. If you'd like to take a look at your chart, or you'd like to take a look at your chart overlaid on somebody else's, like we just did, get a hold of me. My email is down below. My website is down below. I will see you next time. Until then, may the stars forever be in your favor. Take good care. Bye for now.